I've always chuckled when people say they don't make them like they used to, because so often it's both true and misleading. Oftentimes they don't make them like they used to, they make them better. 50 years ago, a car's engine was completely worn out at 100,000 miles. These days, it's not uncommon to see cars go twice that. But in the world of major appliances, things that used to have an expected life of 15 years at the minimum, that's not the case anymore. Steve Leto just posted a video about the epidemic of bad refrigerators, and because I'm weird, I wanted to expand upon that and dig into why things aren't lasting like they used to. If you've recently bought a new refrigerator or are thinking about buying one, here's why your new one might not last as long as your old one, and by extension, how you can improve your chances of getting one that does. Steve and several of the folks who commented on his video are spot on when they surmise that increasing, and perhaps needless, complexity is mostly to blame. Refrigerators are not actually complicated, at least not in the number of essential components you need to make a fridge. You need a big insulated box, some shelves, a thermostat, and a refrigeration system, usually comprising a compressor, condenser, evaporator, and some sort of metering device. That's it. Technology Connections has several great videos diving into the magic of the vapor compression refrigeration cycle, so I won't repeat all that here, but suffice to say, we've been making refrigerators that use the exact same system for more than 100 years. Sure, refrigerants have changed and we've added doodahs like automatic defrost into the mix over the years, but the basic design is common to pretty much every home refrigerator on the shelves today. So if we're using a time-tested system, why are so many fridges these days garbage? One reason is because we keep adding on extra stuff, things you don't need for a fridge to perform its primary function of keeping your food cold. I'm not just talking about smart features, though those can certainly be to blame. I'm talking about water dispensers, ice makers, flex zones, and chilled filtered water carafes that refill automatically. All those features add extra complexity, and they're almost always the first things to break. Ice makers can be particularly problematic by nature of the design and the fact that they're in a harsh environment. It's freezing in the freezer. Also, they mix electronics and water. Consumer Reports survey data has repeatedly backed up the assertion that ice makers are one of the most trouble-prone features. Generally, though, if those bonus features quit working, it's not the end of the world. At least your food will still be cold. But that's not the only stuff we've added on. The other major change manufacturers have added in recent years is the proliferation of electronic controls. For time immemorial, a mechanical timer controlled how often the freezer defrosted itself, and a mechanical thermostat determined when the compressor turned on to keep things cold. Sure, the temperature in your fridge or freezer would be more of an ish than a precise number, but whether the freezer was 0 degrees Fahrenheit or 6 didn't make that much of a difference as long as the refrigerator section was above 32 degrees and below 40 degrees as well.
I'm not worried about you, I'm worried about the refrigerator!
But now electronics likely control the whole fridge. That's not necessarily bad. Instead of the freezer defrosting every 24 hours on the dot, whether it needed it or not, now they adapt to conditions, saving energy and wear on the system. If you live in Las Vegas where the humidity is low, frost won't build up nearly as fast, so there's no reason to cycle the defrost heater more often than every few days. Temperatures are maintained to a strict set point by electronic sensors, only allowing a small variation. If the temperature in the fridge section is a little higher but the freezer is plenty cool, the control board might just quietly run the fan to circulate cold air from the freezer instead of cycling the compressor. The ice maker won't fill with water or eject ice cubes while the door is open or the defrost cycle is in progress. That's all great when it works. But if the control board develops a fault, all sorts of wacky things can happen, the worst of which is it won't run the compressor when it needs to in order to keep things cold. But it can also do odd things like fail to initiate the defrost cycle, allowing the coils in the freezer section to ice up like the old days. And in other cases, it'll initiate defrost but won't turn off the compressor, fighting against itself instead. If your freezer is cold but the refrigerator section is warm, that might be what's happening. Of course, the presence of a circuit board alone isn't cause for concern. It's totally possible and perhaps probable that a well-designed circuit board could far outlast mechanical sensors with physical switches and contacts. But it also means there's a single point of failure now that all the functions are centralized. Buying a model that has effectively been on the market for years, one where the manufacturer has had ample chance to perfect their control circuitry, is one way to help minimize the likelihood of problems here. That's probably good advice for anything. New doesn't necessarily mean better. It can just as often mean untested. And that's the third reason things aren't lasting as long as they used to. New, untested technology. Most refrigerators in the US from legacy manufacturers, GE, Whirlpool, Frigidaire, and the like, use a time-tested, relatively simple yet effective system. Most of the stuff that makes the fridge cold is in the freezer section. When the freezer temperature rises higher than the thermostat set point, the compressor turns on and the freezer gets cold again. The compressor is either on or it's off. In the simplest refrigerators, the ones where the freezer is on top, there's usually some sort of thermostatically actuated damper or door between the freezer and the fridge that controls how much cold air drifts down to the fridge. But again, most of the cooling business actually happens in the freezer. The South Koreans have different ideas about that, and it's interesting to note that the two Korean brands, LG and Samsung, are both known among repair professionals I talk to as producing some of the most trouble-prone models. LG and their linear compressor were the subject of Steve Leto's video. The problem there is that LG decided they didn't want the compressor to either be on or off. They wanted one that could run at whatever speed it needed to in order to cool the fridge down. On the surface, this makes sense. It saves energy and it makes their refrigerator supremely quiet most of the time. But it also introduces that dreaded extra layer of complexity by adding on all the stuff needed to make a compressor be able to run at variable speed. LG claims they've addressed this problem, but given the lawsuit, maybe they haven't. Samsung addressed another problem nobody needed fixed. They added a second evaporator so the fridge and freezer could be cooled independently, though they only use a single compressor, what they call twin cooling. It seems to be mostly a hollow differentiator. It doesn't really make the fridge any better, but it's a way Samsung can say they're different. The fact that LG is facing lawsuits over defective refrigerators is surprising given the quality of some of their other products, most notably their excellent laundry appliances. Surveys and testing repeatedly laud the performance and relatively low repair rate of their front-load washers and dryers, so they clearly know how to engineer decent appliances. On the other hand, I've heard nothing but complaints about pretty much all of Samsung's major appliances. They seem to be all show and no-go, prioritizing sales puffery, trendy finishes, and shiny gizmos over longevity and quality. And that Samsung effect is the fourth reason things might not last. We're prioritizing form over function. Some of the most energy efficient and reliable refrigerators are the simplest and the cheapest, traditional top freezer models. Cold air sinks, so if you put the freezer on the top, the refrigerator only has to passively meter the exchange of air from the freezer down to the refrigerator compartment. But the most popular refrigerators by far these days are French door models, with the freezer on the bottom. That design forces manufacturers to make multiple compromises. Now they need a powered fan to circulate air up into the refrigerator from the freezer, forcing cold air to travel in the opposite direction that it wants to. And the fact that you've got two refrigerator doors with a gap in the middle means you need some sort of movable divider bar to seal the gap when the doors are closed, but that lets you open either door first. Splitting the shelves across two doors also reduces the amount of usable space, and it means you can't put your fridge in a corner because one door will always smack against the wall. Those form over function issues extend to the features that we buy as well. Flex zones, through-the-door ice service, water dispensers, all those things require compromises, and in some cases ridiculously complex engineering to make them work. Through-the-door ice service basically cuts a hole in the fridge or freezer door. The only thing holding the cold air in, or more accurately keeping heat out, is a weak little flapper door. It's definitely not the most energy efficient way to do it, and probably not the best way to keep your food uniformly cold either. If you have a side-by-side refrigerator, it's less of an issue because the ice maker can be positioned above the dispenser. But in a French door refrigerator, getting the ice to the door dispenser on the refrigerator not only introduces a Rube Goldberg mess of mechanical trickery, but also means giving up refrigerator space to house that extra component, often an entirely separate ice maker from the one in the freezer. So if you want to avoid trouble as much as possible, it wouldn't be a bad idea to look for the simplest refrigerator that meets your needs. You'll probably save money and headache by doing so. Now, I'm not saying forego all your wants. Having a built-in ice maker is incredibly convenient and something I personally insisted on having when I bought a new fridge 5 years ago. I also bought a bottom freezer model because I'm tall enough that stooping down to get things out of the refrigerator is annoying. I hedged my bets by buying a time-tested model from a company that's been making this same basic fridge for more than 30 years. And I'm hoping if I take care of it, it'll last me a long time. This video is already way longer than I meant it to be, so I'll just close by saying this. Take care of your appliances. Change the water filters from time to time, wipe down the shelves, and most of all, try to keep the condenser coil clean. I guarantee most people never think of getting down there with a vacuum and sucking out the dog hair and dust that's inevitably blocking most of the fins, forcing the compressor to work longer and harder to keep your food cold. Taking a few minutes to do some maintenance is a whole lot easier than buying a new fridge, though if you've ever tried to do it, they do not make it easy. So just do your best. Let me know how your experience has been in the comments, and until next time, we don't have a problem. We've got an opportunity to get a better refrigerator. Good luck.